So 3 labs across the industry that are accredited by UGC, and some labs have more than others, but there's roughly 30 of them nationwide, and will continue to. That's a 2-year certification, so they have to retake that exam every year, and they take that exam on every technology that they interpret. So there's roughly 7 or 8 of them. They would have to take a test 7 or 8 times if they wanted to interpret images from every system there is. The reinventing the wheel part, we went back and started collecting carcass data again 3 years ago. From 2018 to 2020, we tested every technician that had been certified, and I'll detail that more here in a bit. As of last fall, after we got done testing all of those technicians, we reinstated what we call absentia certification. So that's where the technician is not required to come back, but we altered it a bit. So every machine from here on out will have carcass data behind it every 4 years. Before that, there really was no limitation. So we found enough issues that we need to keep continually testing those machines in order to ensure that the data you're getting is accurate. So the field certification for all technicians, some of those folks had not had carcass data behind their machine in over 15 years. In fact, one technician, I asked her how long it was since she had certified, and she said, well, the last time I saw you, my son was in 5th grade and he's in grad school now. So that gives you a frame of reference of how much time passed between the last time they had to certify. And that was some of the original technicians that had been around a while. We also required that if a technician changed technologies, like if they went from an Aloka and upgraded to an Evo, they had to go and certify again using that Evo machine. They are slightly different, which Tommy may touch on here after a while, but we wanted to make sure that they were proficient, that machine run correctly, and then they could certify regardless of what machine they used. And then we got rid of the repeatability column. So a long look at the stats in field cert, no one ever really failed based on repeatability. Either you knew what you were doing the first time the animal came in the chute, or you didn't. And we were thirsty for carcass data. So rather than doing 20 head and repeating that, we went to 40 head once. That allowed us to get more carcass records. That allowed the technicians to scan a wider variety of cattle. It gave us the opportunity to go get more variation. The flip side of that was what happened between 2018 and 2020 is the cattle were really hard to get. The market wasn't very friendly to us. The cattle got big, got fat, got really hard to scan in some cases, but we worked our way through it. And then the final highlight just recently is we have a new website, Ranch House Designs, which Rachel was on the program in the Young Producer Symposium. They are managing our new website. It is a new domain name. They no longer would service the domain name we had, so we had to do something. So it's ultrasoundguidelinescouncil.org. So the 3-year study, or the 3-year certification that we did, there's a little over 127 if you look at the bottom there. Some techs had to take the test twice in that 3-year period, so they'll be double counted. But the absentia techs, so those were the techs that previously would have scanned enough cattle, had enough experience, been around long enough that they would have qualified. When those techs came back through, 2 of the 63 actually failed the exam. And 3 of them, the CP is what we call a conditional pass. So we found an equipment issue with 3 of those techs that needed to be addressed. The images either wouldn't process, or they wouldn't process correctly, or there was a cable issue, or some sort of hardware software issue happened. And those techs had to retake the test as quickly as they possibly could, meaning within 6 months or 6 months after that. So we found some equipment problems with some of the really experienced folks. And then you see the vast array of how many different machines that we process images from now. So Gene's in here used to be a Aloka and Classic for a long time. That's different now. We still use those machines, and we'll detail those here in a bit. But there's a lot of new technology that has hit the industry and the techs that use them very greatly. So a little bit more on the machine breakdown. And you'll see the number of techs that either passed, failed was listed there previously, but I want to highlight this right here because these 4 systems represent 47% of the technicians that are in the industry right now. So that's obviously a little less than half. I don't have an idea of percentage of the images that are submitted from those systems, but the reason I highlight those is those 4 technologies are no longer produced. They're no longer serviced. They're not really supporting those older platforms. So that's a bit of a concern that half of our techs roughly are using an obsolete system. I know you're not going to be able to read this, but the driving force is look for the yellow. So these are the stats from FieldCert, and these are the orange highlighted systems from the previous page. So in some cases, you'll see 1 line underneath the machine. That's because 1 lab can process that kind of a machine. Some of you only see 3. Well, there's 3 labs that can process that kind of machine. The yellow areas are the areas of concern. Those are above the threshold that UGC has set for either error, correlation, bias, whatever stat we're looking at. If you look at the new technologies that we're looking at over 3 years, you see no yellow. So what I'm not saying is that the models are poor or something went wrong with the technology that we were using. It's that I think there's some machines in there that aren't running like they used to. Is there issues potentially with model robustness, and are they able to capture ultrasound data on the population that is here today versus what was here 15, 20 years ago when that model was certified? We don't really know that, but the population is certainly different. The other thing that I think is important to note is that the sets of certification cattle that we looked at were all big, heavy, fat steers for the most part. They're more difficult to scan than a yearling bull. They're certainly more difficult to scan than a grass-fed heifer. So it is a difficult set of cattle. So we're running those people through the gauntlet and really testing whether they know how to collect a quality image or not. So it's not just a formality that you go through this test. It is difficult to pass. The flip side on the new techs, those machines performed well. I'm not going to put all that stuff on one slide. I think it's important to point out that we're not seeing a lot higher correlations, a lot lower errors, and much better stats from the new systems than we did from the old. There is a limitation with two-dimensional black and white screen on what that technology can do on a carcass. There is a limit. There's also an error, which I talked about the last time I presented at BIF on the carcass side of things. So we have limits on stats where I don't think you're ever going to see an ultrasound machine that's going to correlate at 95. It's just not part of what the technology is capable of doing. But it is reassuring that the new systems that have hit the market are doing a very good job, as good as the old stuff and better, at assessing carcass quality. So where do we go from here? Areas of concern from my perspective, and this is not the opinion of the board, this is the opinion of your exec on the stuff that I've read, saw, kind of summarized, but some of the established technology didn't perform very well against carcass data. And when I say established technology, is that a technology problem or is it an individual machine problem? We had several techs that if you looked at the screen and you're a trained eye like I am, you saw nothing wrong. But when the algorithms hit that image to try to give you an IMF number, it struggled. So you can't wrong. Not all machine problems are visible to the naked eye. The good thing about the new systems is they're all digital. So they are consistent. All of the stuff that's coming out is digital, not analog. So I think the problems will be more apparent if they arise. They haven't arose yet. Another problem that was kind of discovered along the way, UGC can only test one machine technician combination at a time. We have technicians, one of them said when he came through certification that he owns 6 Alocas. How do we test that? It's not economically feasible to it's not really economically feasible for UGC to ask techs to use every single machine combination they've got. So we have some hurdles to work through, and long term, what do we do with it? The thing that was probably more challenging in 2020, and it cost us dearly on a set of cattle, is packing plant access got really difficult, almost impossible. And we relied on internal packing plant employees to get ether extract data and carcass data back out, and they flat missed a tag transfer, and there was nothing we could do. So that was really frustrating, and I don't think that problem's away. Um, they'll let you in there to take carcass data. I'm really happy that that Ty is going to be involved with the West Texas group. The Planet Tyson trusts him, and that's huge. So they'll let us in there. They'll let us grab what we need, get out of there, and do the necessary research to test those technicians. Just a summary page. So UGC has budgeted some travel dollars for me to inform Breed Association Board of Directors on how the current performance of the technology is doing. Where are we good? Where do we need to fix? What do we got to decision-wise to make moving forward? Should we be doing anything differently? And those folks are the decision makers. We are the guidelines, and they decide what they want to do with ultrasound data at their own particular breed. Technicians must participate in a UGC field certification every 4 years. If they change technologies, they have to come back before then. So at the very least, we will get carcass data compared to every machine that's being used actively in the industry at least every 4 years, better than where we were. There's roughly 125 plus technicians nationwide. We'll have carcass data behind every single one of them. We will be able to detect if there's an issue and get those things corrected before things get out of hand. For the first time, and this is really significant from my standpoint, I believe this was something that maybe should have been done a long time ago. UGC offered the IMF data from the field certification to the labs to help them improve their models. That had never been done before. It's really expensive data to collect. And we had a set of cattle that had quite a few primes in it. They were fat. They had some really high marbling cattle. It was a data set that was difficult to get if you just went into the industry and tried to find them. So the next step is we're going to West Texas. And Tommy has informed us that we're going to get some eared cattle. Will those cattle be really informative to an IMF model? You bet. Some of those models were developed on traditional British continental cattle, and we know in the industry that the zebu influence makes those cattle scan differently. Their height is different. They handle stress different. So how are we doing ultrasound wise on assessing whether those cattle carcass wise are, we don't really know. We don't have a ton of data on them, so it'd be good to get some. And then, on top of that, we'll begin to work with the Bos Indicus breeds. Colin Osborne from Beefmaster was added to the UGC Board of Directors. That's one of the first eared breed representatives that we've had in some time. So hopefully there'll be representation across the industry. I think Tommy would have been the last person that was on from an eared breed. So we need equal representation. I mentioned the board several times. That's your current one. They have been installed as of 2 days ago now, I guess it is. So there's 4 breed reps. There's 3 lab reps, 1 from each lab. There's 3 from industry, 1 technician, 1 field tech, and then myself. And with that, I will take any questions. Okay, good question. So question was volume of images collected across the industry and volume of technicians in the industry. So I don't know that I can go back further than 5 years. So I've only been here 3.5, 4, whatever it is. So I would say we're down slightly, but I would also say that from what I'm seeing, 2020 to 2021 is going to be pretty stagnant. So I think we've kind of reached the critical mass that are going to do it. We've had some instances where operations that hadn't scanned in quite some time are doing it again. So I don't think that, and I got this question in the UGC board meeting as well. I don't think you're still going to see the mass exodus from carcass ultrasound. I think it's going to continue to be collected, and I'm optimistic, but maybe even return. So on the technician front, one of the surprising things when we required techs to come back and certify again, it is a significant expense. Plane tickets, shipping a machine, all that kind of stuff. We had several retire and just said they're not going to continue in the business. Has that been replaced by newer techs? No, but the 125 number has historically been about where the industry is for quite a while now. We were higher than that at one point when the industry kind of peaked, but I'm not as concerned with the technician exodus as maybe I am just the continued adoption of doing it every single year on the ranch. Correct. So I think I should have pointed out when I did that. So the slide of stats, the individuals that failed the test were not included in that stat file that came next. So those are just the people that passed. Would the stats be poorer if I included the techs that failed? Oh yeah. So some of that would be meaning the fails. Most of those would be first-time technicians. It's not an easy test to pass, and we baptized them by fire because they were not easy cattle either. Some of those folks have resisted training, I will say, and just flat keep taking the test again and again and don't get retrained, and they show up in the fail column more than once. But by the machine percentage, the surprising thing was obviously the absentia techs. Those were really experienced folks that I think in what happened, they got on a set of cattle that they hadn't seen in maybe years, didn't know how to scan a fat steer, and they struggled. And some of them had, over time, maybe developed a bad habit or two, and it was discovered and they had to come back and recertify. So I will say any of the absentia techs that failed the first time, when they came back through, they passed. So they had. So the Exego fail rate, so that's a brand new system. So the high percentage there is newbie techs. So they're inexperienced, first time through, and flat just didn't have enough experience to do the set of cattle we put from. That would explain that one. Now the older systems, that would be more bad habits and equipment failure. Good question. Yes, sir. That has been a discussion point at the UGC board level. It usually is a very long discussion and we never really get anywhere. I mean, there's phantoms, there's all sorts of things that have been introduced. We haven't come across anything that can be implemented easily that would help us. If you got any insight, I'd be happy to hear it. But as it stands right now, have we found anything, relative to weather that has impacted the data we think in a significant degree? I don't know the answer to that. We've traditionally done certification, one in the summer, one in the fall, or one in the late spring and one in the fall, and nothing has surfaced. We've actually tested day to day, like do the cattle change day to day based on heat stress? We're going to West Texas in September. It could be anything from who knows to 100. And that's not redheaded kid weather. So if there's griping about the weather, I'll probably be the first one to speak up. But to answer your question in short, no, we have not. Probably should look at it. Haven't discovered anything worth pursuing yet. Oh, okay, good. Hopefully I can remember those. So certification is in Canyon, Texas at West Texas A&M for the first time ever. We've never been that far south to my knowledge. Well, I guess it's been in Mississippi and several other places. Never been to West Texas. How about that? September 15th through the 17th. So 3 days, we'll do at least 10 techs a day and accommodate those that need to certify or recertify. There is some training going on. Holly, when is your training? So good question. I think Kelly just volunteered to do continuing ed on foot score training. I think that's what I heard. So, I mean, it works with yearling data. So whatever yearling data gets collected should be something a tech considers. Now, the flip side of that has always been speed. I mean, sometimes it's cold in February, and you want to get that data done and back and out, so it's in the sale catalog and all those things that get us in a hurry. And a lot of times we just flat don't slow down and realize, gosh, we could have foot scored them while they were standing there. So part of that goes back to what is the role of the Ultrasound Guidelines Council, and do we get involved in that? I think that fits really well in a continuing ed program, which I should have mentioned. All of the techs are required to go through a continuing ed. When they certify is the obvious time that we do it. It's usually 60, 90 minutes, and that would be an awesome topic to cover. I actually train on foot score and extension, so I'll even bail you out and do it myself. Good point.